giving in marriage up to the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. This is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken and the other left. 2 women will be grinding with a hand mill, one will be taken and the other left. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what time of night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have let his house be broken into. So you also must be ready, because the Son of Man will come at an hour when you do not expect him. Who then is the faithful and wise servant, whom the master has put in charge of the servants in his household to give them their food at the proper time? It will be good for that servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. I tell you the truth, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But suppose that servant is wicked and says to himself, my master is staying away a long time. And he then begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with the drunkards. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, at an hour when he is not aware of it, and he will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. At that time the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, and 5 were wise. The foolish ones took their lamps, but did not take any oil with them. The wise, however, took oil in jars along with their lamps. The bridegroom was a long time in coming, and they all became drowsy and fell asleep. At midnight the cry rang out, here is the bridegroom, come out to meet him. When all the virgins woke up and trimmed their lamps, the foolish ones said to the wise, give us some of your oil, our lamps are going out. No, they replied, there may not be enough for both us and you. Instead, go to those who sell oil and buy some for yourselves. But while they were on their way to buy the oil, the bridegroom arrived, and the virgins who were ready went in with him to the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later, the others also came. Sir, sir, they said, open the door for us. But he replied, I tell you the truth, I don't know you. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour. All right, so, let's see. Ready or not, right? You ever played that game? You ever played hide and seek? My kids love to play it. In fact, that get me to play it. My grandkids. And I can tell you, football doesn't hide so well anymore. All right, so there's not too many places in the house big enough for me to hide in. But what I want to do for a few minutes, there are a couple of primary points in these stories that I want us to catch. All right, so the first one is this one. So Adam. Play button. There you go.
Surprise, surprise.
All right, I know that's probably not necessary, right? But I wanted you to catch it. I wanted you to know that the first thing I want you to get out of this is the fact that Jesus coming is going to surprise us. All right? The timing will surprise us. In fact, the fact is, by the way, how many of you knew who that was? Okay, I know how old you are then. But anyway, the timing will surprise us, all right? In fact, Jesus points out in the story, he says, as we began reading this in Matthew chapter 24, right there at verse 36, he says that no one knows. In fact, the only person who knows when is the Father. Not even the Son knows, he said. I don't even know when it's going to happen. I only depend on God to know that, all right? So it's an interesting idea that the fact is that the coming of Jesus is going to surprise us, all right? Now, I can tell you, there have been a lot of people throughout the years who have tried to predict it, right? How many of you guys, have you seen any of the predictions? In fact, I showed a couple of them last week. There was one that I think it was in 2011, something in May of 2011, that Jesus was going to return on that day, had gone through and taken all this information and had calculated it out and said, this is when it's going to happen, right? And it didn't happen.
Wasn't there a book like
There were 88 reasons why Jesus would return in 1988. Yeah. And then, of course, in 1989, they came out with 89 reasons why he would come back in 89. They had miscalculated, and they had an 89th reason why he was going to come back in 89. By the way, he didn't come. Okay? Now, you may say, yeah, well, that's a little presumptuous. How do you know? Because Scripture is pretty emphatic over the fact that when he returns, it will not be hidden. It will be something that everyone sees and knows. All right? And so what I want you to understand is this. The first thing I want you to really catch is that it's going to be a surprise, and the reason it's important for us to recognize and realize that is that so often we want to do exactly what this story describes. It says, if the owner of the house had known when the thief was going to come, what would he have done? He would have stayed up. He would have watched. He would have waited. In fact, I can tell you what he would have done around here. He'd have been sitting in the living room with the shotgun loaded. Right? Just try it. Correct? The fact is that we don't know when Jesus is going to return, and his point in that story is he's coming like a thief. He's coming at a time, at an hour, at a day, at an hour when we're not expecting it. Okay? And so the reason that's important to know is he uses the rest of these stories to tell us what we need to be doing. All right? So you need to understand the timing will surprise us. Okay? So the next thing, it says in there that there are two working in the field, and one will be taken and the other left. There'll be two women grinding, and one will be taken and the other left. Now, I can tell you that most people take that idea, the story, the idea of two men working side by side, one taken and the other left, and they tend to associate that with the idea of the rapture. I want you to understand, I don't think that's what that's referring to. I think what that's referring to is the fact that who we really are is going to be revealed. And in fact, we have a tendency to look at people and we see the outside, right? We have a tendency to see what we think they're like. But God sees the inside. God sees the heart of man. And what I want you to get in this is that what he's saying is that who is taken will also surprise us. Okay? I think we're going to be shocked. I think there's going to be some of this, wait a minute, I didn't expect that. But what I want you to get here is this idea of who we really are will be revealed. Okay? Now, I'm going to tell you all up front. We have a tendency, and I don't think I'm all that different than probably most of you. Now, I'll admit, I am different in many ways, right? I know some of you are saying, oh yeah, I've got hair. But the fact is that I want you to recognize that we are alike in many ways, and one of those ways that I think we're alike is we have a tendency, I think, we have a tendency to we don't let too many people know what we're really thinking and feeling. You agree? We have a tendency to put on a mask. Okay? We have a tendency to be the person they expect us to be. Right? Now, I made a statement several weeks ago, and I made the statement about the fact that I know what my heart is like. I know how dark my heart really is. I know what I'm capable of doing. And I know the change that God has wrought in me, the change that God has made in me. Because some of the things that I'm capable of doing, God has made now abhorrent to me. Things that I am capable of doing, God has begun to make me see as something I don't want anything to do with that. Okay? Now I want you all to understand that's exactly the kind of change that ought to be happening in us. All right? But I want you to catch this fact that who we really are, okay, the truth of who we really are is going to come out. Okay? In other words, the things that you hide from your friends, your family, sometimes even your best friend, the fact of who you really are, those feelings, those thoughts, those actions, they're going to be revealed. There is nothing that's going to be hidden. In fact, I can tell you, Paul talks about the fact that there will come a day when our hearts are laid bare before God. And the idea that Paul uses in this, now I know this is a little bit gross, but bear with me just for a second. Are y'all familiar with the historical way of Olympic wrestling, Greco-Roman wrestling. Are y'all familiar? If you're not, let me give you a little insight, all right? Now, I know if you've ever been to high school wrestling, sometimes you stop and go, well, they're not wearing a whole lot, right? Well, surprise, surprise, Greco-Roman wrestlers didn't wear anything, okay? They actually wrestled in the nude. Yeah. And the wording that Paul uses to describe this idea of our heart being laid bare before God is the idea of being in a wrestling hold that basically has us exposed. In other words, we have been laid out, we can't move, we're being held down, and we're in such a position that there's nothing hidden. Now I know that's not a pretty sight, right? Right? But it's before God. And what that means is that there is nothing in our hearts, nothing in our lives, nothing that we've done that is hidden from His sight. God knows all of those secret things. There's nothing you can hide from Him. And what I want you to understand as we take a look at this morning is that all of the truth of who we are will be exposed, all right? For as in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark. They didn't care, right? They were having a great time. I mean, come on, guys, let's live it up. We're not going to be here forever, right? You know people that kind of approach life that way? Now, I can tell you, I think we ought to approach life with a zest and with a joy and with a, God's given it to us. We ought to enjoy it, all right? But within the directions that He's given us, okay? Within the directions that He's given us. But I want you to understand something. Notice this. But if that wicked servant says to himself, my master is delayed, and he begins to beat his fellow servants and eats and drinks with the drunkards, what's he going to do? Y'all remember? We'll get to that in a second. But what I want you to get is this guy thinks, I'm not going to get caught. Right? He's not coming back anytime soon. I'm not going to get caught. And I want you to understand, God knows every secret thing. Right? Every secret thing. Now that should be a little bit, shall I say, oh, okay. Yes, He knows. But I can tell you He's also made provision for it. All right? So, next thing. Not only will it be revealed, we will stand accountable for it. Okay? We will stand accountable. All right? So accountability. We take responsibility for the commitment that we make, the actions we take, for the problems that occur, and we accept that we will be judged on these. Ooh. You know, we like the word accountability until it begins to apply to us, right? We like the idea of being accountable until it's us who's standing before God and He's saying, kind of like the nice and naughty list, right? I told Andy, I said, I don't want to know. I know what list I'm on. Right? So, take a look at this. Each one of us will stand accountable for God. 2 men will be in the field, one will be taken, the other left. Blessed is that servant whose master will find him so doing when he returns. We are going to stand before God. We are going to give an account of our lives. Now, I want you to know something. I want you to understand that the Scriptures talk about 2 judgments. All right? So I want to clarify. I want you to understand this. There is what we would call the general judgment, the judgment of the righteous and the wicked. Jesus will judge us on that. And those of us who are believers, who have trusted in Jesus Christ, who are walking with Him, it says that we will be recognized as being covered in His blood, right? Our sin can only be cleansed by Him. It can only be covered by a sacrifice. Somebody's blood, Hebrews says, blood must be shed for sin. Y'all get that? Something has to die. There has to be a sacrifice to pay for sin. And the question is, what will that sacrifice be? Now, man had been trying to pay, had been giving these sacrifices, the lambs, the goats, the bulls, all of those things, trying to make up for that, but it's simply insufficient. And the reason it's insufficient, folks, is because You know what you're like, right? Is there enough sacrifice to make up for everything? The fact is that we need to recognize that God's going to hold us accountable. Jesus Christ is the one who has been sacrificed in our place. A lot of times people understand this whole idea, this story about Jesus dying on the cross. Jesus didn't die on the cross because of some sin or some crime he committed. In fact, if you look at the story, time and time and time again in that story, those who were involved in it said, I can't find anything wrong with him. I'm washing my hands of this. That's what Pilate said. Pilate said, I can find nothing wrong with him. I can find nothing to hold him accountable for this. I'm washing my hands of it. This is on your head, right? So if Jesus didn't die for his own sins, whose sins did he die for? Y'all know in that story there is an interesting, and I didn't intend to do this morning, but just for a second I'm going to digress. Y'all know there's an interesting parallel in that story. Y'all know in that story whose cross Jesus died on? Barabbas. Y'all remember the story? Barabbas was scheduled to die that day. Jesus was a surprise addition. Right? They let one of the prisoners go because it was a holy day. And they asked the people, which one? Should we let Christ go or should we let... They said, no, let Barabbas go. Crucify Christ. Let Barabbas go. Okay? Now what you may not know is this. Jesus died on Barabbas' cross in his place. But do y'all know what the name Barabbas means? Barabbas, what it means, what it translates to? It's a real simple word, I can tell you. It's real simple. The word bar means son. Child, son. Abba, you've heard before, haven't you? It means father. So Barabbas is daddy's boy, or son of father, child of dad. There are several ways you might translate that, but what it means is, you ever heard the story Every Man? Old literature, Every Man? Y'all realize that's what Barabbas was? His name meant he's every child. He's the son of every father. He's every child. He's us. He was scheduled to die that day because of his rebellion. He had been arrested and was convicted and tried and was going to be crucified because he was a rebel. He had rebelled against the Roman government. Okay? But he was set free and Jesus took his place. Y'all realize that's you and me? We've been set free and he took our place. Alright, so I've said it's going to be a surprise. Alright? I said it could happen. I didn't mention this. It could happen at any moment. Right? It could happen at any moment. So what I want you to do just for a second is he uses a story here to remind you of the importance of being prepared, of being ready. And he uses the story, one that doesn't make a lot of sense to us really. It's a story of what we would, it's the story of the 10 virgins, all right? And the story is this. Let me try to retell this a little bit and help it make sense. In Jewish culture, a wedding would be planned. But when the wedding would actually occur was a bit of a surprise. Okay? Because the wedding would be planned, but it would be when I get things all finished, when everything is ready, then we'll have it. Okay? Now this was up to the groom. The groom was the one who would get everything ready. He was the one who was preparing everything. All right? And so as he would get everything ready, people would be anticipating. They would have their gifts, they would be prepared, they would have their clothes, all of those things down. The idea was they knew it was drawing near, and it says in the story that these 10 young ladies, okay, these 10 young ladies knew that they were to be a part of the wedding, and they were prepared, and they had gathered together, they had their lamps, and these are just small oil lamps, okay? And they had come, and while they waited, they knew that the groom was supposed to come that night. That was expected. Okay, he's going to come soon. We just don't know exactly when. And so they had gathered together, and as the evening progressed, they got sleepy, right? And as they got sleepy, they took a little nap. And as they took a little nap, their lamp here is burning the oil, right? And as it burns down, then suddenly the call comes out, the bridegroom is coming. Prepare, get ready. They wake up. They're sort of like, hey, girls, get ready, he's coming. And everybody gets up, and I can see them get there. I'm sure they didn't have a mirror, right? But they're in there, and they're trying to get ready. They laid down for just a minute, right? You ladies see this? I can see this. I have done enough weddings back here, I can tell you. They're back there, they're trying to get everything just right. Everything ready, okay? And the bridegroom's coming. And suddenly 5 of them say, oh no. Okay? What'd you forget? We didn't bring the extra oil. Our lamps are going out. It's midnight. You can't see. By the way, this is a culture in which there are no street lamps. Right? There are no lights. They're not going to go flip on the light. They're running out of oil. And suddenly they're in a panic. What are we going to do? Give us some of yours. I can hear that too, can't you? I can hear it. I can hear these girls. Oh, come on. Give us a little bit of yours. Well, if we give you some of ours, ours might go out. We're not going to give you any of ours. Go get some. They run down to the the 7-Eleven, the quick trip. They run down, they're beating on the guy's door. We need some oil. Go away. I'm not getting up and selling you oil at this hour. Do you know what time it is? Right? And they're begging and they're pleading. They've got to get some oil. They're ready for this. They get ready for this wedding. Now, I know I'm making a big deal of this, but here's what I want you to get. So often in our lives, we think we have plenty of time to get ready. It's been 2,000 years. Jesus ain't coming back anytime soon, right? Maybe not. Because I can tell you, He doesn't know the moment, He doesn't know the hour, He doesn't know the day, only the Father does, and it's going to catch all of us off guard. Right? So the fact is that we have got to be prepared and we have got to be ready. And that's what this whole story is about. It's about being ready at any moment. Being prepared to meet God. Being prepared to be called in to the wedding of the Lamb. Being prepared to answer the question, why should I let you into heaven? Right? And I can tell you, most people want to say, well, because I'm a pretty good guy. Have you checked out? Look at my credentials. I've got this degree, and I've done this, and I've worked at this place. And just look at my family, right? And what I want y'all to catch is this. That has absolutely no bearing on it. I don't care what family you came from. It doesn't matter what degree you have. It doesn't matter what position you hold. It doesn't matter how much money you have in the bank. It doesn't matter any of those things, those trappings of what man tends to think of as important. Right? And we have them, don't we? We all have them. We all refer to them. We all wear them with pride. And I can tell you, when we stand before God, they all amount to a big nothing. They're absolutely worthless. Everything that we can muster together, everything that we can bring and put before God, God looks at it and says, what value is that? That's of no value. That's filthy. Get that out of my sight. Because everything we do, listen to me, everything we do tends to be selfish. Right? Seriously. All those things that we're trying to gather together. Take a look at this, God. First of all, I'll tell you, the first thing that happens is our pride begins to well up, right? And pride in itself is selfish. Take a look at what I've done. Well, folks, I can tell you, it doesn't stand before God. So you need to understand we've got to be ready at any moment. Because His judgment is irreversible and eternal. Now I want you to catch, and I'm going to highlight just this one piece about the fact it says that this wicked servant says to himself, my master is delayed. He begins to beat his fellow servants and eats and drinks with the drunkards. the master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, at an hour he does not know, and will cut him in pieces and put him with the hypocrites. Wow. This guy is depending on his relationship, right? I mean, God had put him in a position of authority and leadership. It ought to make pastors really cringe to read this passage. And I can tell you it does. It causes me. I mean, I stop and read that and think, Father, help me. I want to make sure I'm doing exactly what you want. But folks, if God does that to servants he puts in charge, just imagine. Right? It says that this servant thought that he would stand before the master based on his history, based on his past, right? He had done all these things. The master had trusted him. He had been a faithful servant for all these years, right? But then the master is delayed in his coming, and what does he do? His true colors shine through, right? Isn't it easy, by the way, isn't it easy to do what's expected of you when everyone's watching? It's a whole lot easier to do it, I can tell you. It's a whole lot easier to do what's expected of you when everybody's looking at it. But in the dark, or when no one's looking, right? Let me give you, on the internet, where no one knows your name. Seriously. That's one of those places where anonymity becomes a cloak of invisibility, right? We're able to take it, we're able to put it on, we're able to be, or become, or see, or do, and right? Let me tell you something. What you do in the dark, hear me clearly on this, what you do in the dark reveals the true nature of your character. Seriously. When nobody can see, when nobody knows, when nobody is holding you accountable, what really comes out is what you really are. And I want you to understand, you will stand before the judge. So, God's a God of love. Let me tell you something. Scripture says, first of all, that Jesus is the one who's been given the task of judging. And Jesus is the one who knows exactly what we're capable of because he has been one of us. I want you to understand, he knows what we're like. Are we ready to live in the kingdom? Are we ready to stand before him? It's not a game of hide and seek. It's not a game of trying to put our best foot forward, and that's what God's going to judge us on. It's not a game of making sure that they see what we want them to see, right? Put on the good suit, make sure you got the right mask on, right? Smile. It doesn't work. Because God knows what's in here. And that's what we're going to stand before him without. We're going to stand before him being judged on who we are at the heart, laid bare. Seriously, I know that is a mental image that we all cringe at. I told you that wrestling hold, right? And it's all about, I don't even want to think about that. Just for a second, though, I want you to understand that is exactly the image Paul intended for us to see. That there is nothing in our lives that is not exposed to God. He knows it. He sees it. Every bit of it. Now what are you going to do? I want you to bow your heads with me. I want to ask you a very simple question. If Jesus could come back at any moment, and that's what Scripture indicates, he can come back at any moment. Are you ready? Are you ready? I'm not asking you to put on a face. I'm not asking you to pretend. I'm just asking, I want you to be honest with me. Are you ready? If you're not, this is not something you have to settle with me. This is something you have to settle with Him. Because the real question is not whether you believe Jesus is the Son of God. That's not the question. It's a part of the whole issue, but that's not the question. Because I can tell you, the demons know who He is. They acknowledged He was the Son of God. And yet they're still condemned because of their unwillingness to follow His lordship. They're unwilling to let Him lead them. That's the question you need to deal with. Who is in charge of your life? If it's you, you're in trouble. If it's you, you're in trouble. Jesus is the one who deserves to be in charge of your life. That's the issue. Will you let Him? This morning, will you, right where you are right now, will you say, I'm going to let you take over? Because I've been doing nothing but messing this up. I've been doing nothing but making a mess out of this. Forgive me. I know I fail you. I know I have rebelled against you. I know I have sinned over and over and over again. Will you forgive me? And will you take over? I promise you, it doesn't make you perfect, but what it does is it changes your desire. It changes where you're headed. Because then you begin to want to do what He desires. Are you letting this morning? That's what I want to ask you to do. Who's in charge? Let Him be. Father, thank you. Your word is powerful, it's sharp. And Father, just like Paul said, it lays our lives bare before you. Nothing hidden. You know all of those things we try to hide. All those things that are done in secret. Father, you are holding us accountable for those. Father, I thank you in Jesus Christ. You have cleansed and forgiven me. And I pray that if there's someone here this morning who has never done that, but they're ready to do so, that they will fall before you and say, God, forgive me. I want to follow Jesus. We praise you. We ask in Jesus' name. Will you stand with me? David's going to lead us.